Hi, I'm Shana Lipner-Grover from Sage Country Herbs, and we're here in San Diego at Balboa Park's Trees for Health Garden, and we're going to go visit some of our plant friends. One of my favorite reasons to come visit the Trees for Health Gardens at Balboa Park is because I get to meet trees that I, as well as you, have had a relationship with probably for a long time, but I've never actually met it. That's this one up here. This is cinnamon. Everybody knows about cinnamon because it's such a wonderful culinary herb. And yet, most people have never met this native to Southeast Asia tree. So cinnamon's Latin name is Cinnamomum, and there are many, many species, but the one that you probably have the most relationship with in the form of cinnamon sticks and cinnamon powder is Cinnamomum verum. This is also known as sweet cinnamon, Ceylon, or true cinnamon, because it is the one that is most used. Now, there are numerous other species. Sometimes you'll hear about Saigon cinnamon or Cinnamomum camphora. This is actually what this one right here is, Cinnamomum camphora. Now, the camphora is, as a species name, is talking about it's rich in camphor. If you have ever used any topical analgesic over-the-counter product, you probably have experienced camphor, topical analgesic, cooling to inflammation and reducing pain. Used constantly all over the world for things like muscle tension and muscle spasms and sore backs and all those types of things. Now, the other aspect about some of these other species and why they're not as commonly used is that they are rich in a compound called coumarin. And coumarin in small amounts is generally fine, but in larger amounts, coumarin will be toxic to both the liver and kidneys. So we want to use, of course, the species that have less of that and less issues of toxicity. Now, of course, when you think of issues of toxicity, a lot of those issues come up with the excessive use. Maybe years ago, you heard about a trend going on that was called the cinnamon challenge. And the idea was to eat a large amount of cinnamon powder, which is not very easy because cinnamon powder is very astringent and drying, and it can stick to your throat and then make you cough and choke. And I strongly recommend people don't do the cinnamon challenge. Really, what we should be doing is incorporating cinnamon into our daily diets, because then we can make it food as medicine, and cinnamon is a great representation of this. So these trees are generally native to Southern Asia, as I mentioned. We have places like Sri Lanka and India and Bangladesh and Myanmar, but they've also been introduced all over into other areas of China. Very, very common. Part of the reason is because this is one of the original spices from the Silk Road. This is one of the original spices that acted as currency all over the world as spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and cloves and allspice and star anise, and these were traded around the world. So the history of cinnamon is incredibly vast. So cool. So mostly we're talking about trees that grow around 40 to 50 feet. They've got really nice, shiny, kind of waxy leaves that are oblong, often with a nice little point at the end. They're actually very attractive trees, as you can see behind me. When they go to flower, the flowers tend to be small and in panicles. They tend to be kind of yellowish green in their petals. And then when those flowers get pollinated, they turn into fruits. And those fruits, interestingly enough, those fruits actually have no real aromatics, maybe a little bit, but nothing compared to the part that we generally use, which is the inner bark. Those fruits actually look like a miniature cherry. And the reason is because they're of a botanical category called a drupe. The fruit is a drupe, and a drupe is one solid seed with flesh around it, like a cherry. So the fruits may not have a lot of the essential oil that we have come to know and love, but the fruits, the flowers, the leaves have actually been pressed for a byproduct called cinnamon oil. Now, this is a little bit different than the essential oil. It's not as pure. The scent is not as strong. but it is considered a byproduct. Now, of course, the part that we really love, as I mentioned, is the bark, but it's not just the bark. You don't just go up and peel the bark. It's the inner bark. It's called the cambium layer. So when you go up to a cinnamon tree, you don't just automatically smell cinnamon. However, if you give a little scratch to that inner bark, then you really get that, ooh, it's so familiar. The coolest thing, well, there's a lot of cool things. Cinnamon trees can be harvested for their bark for 40 to 50 years. That's a long time. Now, you don't generally take bark from a main trunk because you don't want to be opening up the tree to potential damage. But what is commonly done, especially in areas where these are cultivated, is the side branches. Side branches will be cut and use the bark to create cinnamon sticks. And the longer the quill of that inner bark that twirls, the longer the quill, the higher end that cinnamon stick is. Of course, there's plenty of cinnamon that is just turned into powder because that's often the way that we use it. So the essential oil and cinnamon in general has been used since antiquity. The actual cinnamon powder, commonly used for incense, as well as, sticks, candles, everything that you can imagine that would be scented with cinnamon. Body care products, pooperies. When we think about cinnamon, we think about that warm, sweet aromatic, and it often brings up feelings warm and fuzziness. A lot of people equate cinnamon with things like clove and citrus around the holiday season. For a lot of people, cinnamon represents this time of family and connection, and a lot of this is because our sense of smell is more deeply connected to our memories than any other sense. So that sense of smell of cinnamon and orange has the ability to transport us back to a time when we were experiencing that love and connection of the holidays. It's a really beautiful thing that sometimes it could just be a little cup of tea and you're transported in your mind and in your heart back to that place. There is so much history with the use of cinnamon around the world that it's been shown that it was part of formulas for embalming of mummies in Egypt, along with things like myrrh and cloves. This is powerful, powerful stuff. Now, some of the value of that comes from one of the many active ingredients, but the one, cinnamaldehyde, is very primary. 80 to 90% of the scent of cinnamon comes from that cinnamaldehyde. There's another compound called eugenol that is also part of the little cocktail of compounds that make up cinnamon. Now, eugenol is also in other members of this Lauraceae family, the laurel family. Cloves are part of this family as well, and cinnamon and cloves are both have the compound eugenol. So we can see some family resemblance here, some commonalities within the family. Lauraceae have a lot of plants in them, specifically trees, that have very strong aromatics. And that's what we're looking at cinnamon for. Part of cinnamon's history, of course, is its vast amount of medicinal uses. Cinnamon is a great example of a warming aromatic. So warming, of course, makes you feel warm inside. Well, part of the reason why it's a warming aromatic is because it's also a circulatory stimulant. When you eat something like chilies that are really fiery and you warm up and maybe you start sweating a little, that's recognized because, chilies are spicy. Well, cinnamon is also warming. It's not quite as spicy, but it's a wonderful warming herb. And as a circulatory stimulant, it helps to move warm blood out to our extremities. So things like cinnamon tea, amazing and magical when you have cold hands and feet. A little warm cup of cinnamon tea, it warms you from the inside out, and it's part of that just like warm, fuzzy feeling. Now, another cool thing about it being a warming aromatic is that it helps with digestion. Bringing more blood flow to the digestion, you're going to get more secretion of digestive enzymes and digestive secretions that help with breaking down food. So this is going to be helpful for things like gas and bloating and indigestion and nausea. Once again, a lovely little cup of cinnamon tea can be rather miraculous and make somebody feel more grounded in their body as well. Just so many cool things. This warming aromatic can also work topically. If you infuse cinnamon into, say, an oil, and you use it, massaging it onto, like, say, a sore muscle. It's bringing blood flow to the area, a rubefacient. That action is stimulating the area, bringing some blood flow, helping to break up stagnation, break up inflammation, and move it along. Well, inflammation is pain, redness, heat, and swelling. So cinnamon has anti-inflammatory actions both topically and internally. Super, super cool. It's gonna help with digestion of food, and it's gonna help to reduce any inflammation in the area. Love it. There is so much medicine to work with when it comes to cinnamon. That rich brown color that we've come to associate with cinnamon is rich in antioxidants. Antioxidants are so incredibly powerful in the body, and they are often overlooked. But free radical damage, this is just a part of life. And the way we combat free radical damage is by taking in foods that are rich in antioxidants. Well, some of the richest sources of antioxidants come from our spices. So cinnamon is one of those. It's rich in antioxidants. It has been clinically shown to help reduce elevated blood pressure, to help reduce elevated blood serum cholesterol and triglycerides. That means it's beneficial for cardiovascular disease. That's a really important thing. It's also been shown to be anti-diabetic. Now, what does that mean? Part of the issue of type 2 diabetes, which is so incredibly common in the American culture, is that our cells become less sensitive to the insulin that brings our blood sugar to the cells. If our cells become what's called resistant to insulin, then our cells end up starving and they don't get that glucose. Well, cinnamon helps to keep our cells more sensitive to that blood sugar. I really can't stress how important this is. Of course, cinnamon alone is not going to stop diabetes. It needs to be part of a comprehensive program with making sure we get good nutrition and we move our bodies and all kinds of other important aspects. But cinnamon is a very valuable part, and a really cool one, because you don't need to remember to take your medicine if your medicine is your food. I put cinnamon in my oatmeal in the morning. I put it in my coffee in the morning. It's part of my anti-inflammatory spice blend that I put on my sweet potato fries, I put in soup, I put on stir fries. I love cinnamon. I also learned when cooking, when you use a lot of savory spices like thyme and rosemary and dill, adding some cinnamon in, it gives this really nice warmness to it, and it highlights all those other flavors. It's a little secret of kitchens, is to not only stay focused on savory, that it really helps to round out flavors. Absolutely wonderful. Cinnamon can be savory, it can be sweet. It's really multifaceted, and it's easy to incorporate into your diet. Another really wonderful medicinal part of cinnamon is that it functions as an anticoagulant. So as we age, we make more clotting factor. A little bit of clotting factor, very, very important, so that we don't bleed out from a cut. A lot of clotting factor, especially as we age, leads to the development of more clots. We now understand that's very problematic, especially in the realm of cardiovascular disease. So here's just another way that cinnamon is really helpful. Cinnamon, onions, garlic, chilies, ginger, all of these things are natural blood thinners. They don't stop your body from producing clotting factor, they just help to reduce it. What a great way to be able to incorporate medicine in your food that tastes great at the same time. Now, cinnamon is also an antimicrobial, and that's why historically it's been used for bad breath, gum, mints, but historically even little cinnamon sticks would be used to brush the teeth or to be chewed on for bad breath. And that's not only because it covers it up with that good essential oil, it's also specifically that it's antimicrobial and helps to stop the bacteria that lead to tooth decay, which then also lead to halitosis. One of my favorite things in talking about plants is talking about their herbal actions. Herbal actions are things like astringent, demulcent, diuretic, diaphoretic. Oh, actually cinnamon is all of those. Astringent means it helps to dry, draw, and shrink swollen tissue. So cinnamon has been used topically for things like bug bites. And a demulcent, this one is really fascinating because most demulcents are slimy herbs. Most demulcents are cooling and they're energetic. So think things like chia seeds or marshmallow. But cinnamon is a demulcent, so it has some sliminess to it. At the same time as it's astringent, so it's drying, so it's both hydrating and drying at the same time. And it's a warming energetic. So it's got this magical conglomeration of actions that really make it stand out from a lot of other herbs. Now, the other actions I mentioned were diuretic and diaphoretic. Both of these help the body control the waterways. Where does the water-soluble waste go? So a diuretic encourages urination, and cinnamon has some diuretic actions. Diaphoretic encourages perspiration, and a lot of our warming, stimulating herbs are diaphoretics. So you're burning a fever, a nice cup of warming cinnamon tea will help to break that fever naturally. It's wonderful. So hopefully in all of these wonderful experiences that I've been talking about cinnamon, you've found a way to incorporate it into your own life, or you're probably already doing that in the form of oatmeal raisin cookies. They're not the same without cinnamon. See you next time.